All right.
Okay, I'll be there.
All right. We have started. We're just going to wait till a few folks get in, and then we'll go ahead and start our session. People are popping in. We'll just wait a few minutes until there's 4 seconds in between the popping, and then we'll start.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, I missed the memo on the cool attire and apparel.
Yeah, Lisa kind of sparked it on LinkedIn. You know, she was kind of rallying the troops to do this. Yes. Super fun.
Hello, everyone. We're still waiting for a few folks to join. Just give another minute or so. We have amazing speaker Jason Hall here talking about all the product centric. Stay tuned. We will be here soon.
Yeah. Definitely. Thank you for joining me and listening to me at 7:30 on a Friday evening, if you're at least in the East Coast. I know that is a tough sell. But luckily enough, I don't have.
It's once every 20 years, man.
Once every 20 years.
20 years. What are you gonna do?
And I know I'm getting a little bit of the COVID bump because there's bars are closed. I mean, you can't go anywhere anyway. What are you gonna do? Like huddle in a corner and play Fortnite? Come on.
Right.
Right.
All right. I think we have over 25 joining. Get a little more. I think we're good. We're good to start. Lakshmi, I'll give it over to you.
Sure. Welcome, everyone. So amazing to see you all joining this session. And today's speaker is Jason Hall. I would love to give a little bit of intro background about Jason. Jason is all about product centric. Okay, he's served in public and private industries over about 11 years in Agile. He's everything about product, what customer driven. He started as a product owner in Department of Defense before coming to the coaching world. He has been an organizational shepherd, helping various lines of business deliver products and leading financial industries. Whether it's helping developers adopt a shift left approach or to testing or executives to embrace outcome-oriented leadership, Jason has proven his ability to be and provide an impactful at every level. So without any further delay, I would welcome Jason Hall, and he will be presenting about, impactful product is a new working software. All right. With that, I'll give it to you, Jason.
Thank you, Prashanti. Thank you. Okay, appreciate it. All right, I'm going to share my screen. This will be a little bit interactive. I need to make sure that you're still awake. You can make sure that I'm still awake. So with that, shortly through here, I'll probably ask you to hop on to this little URL, polev.com, Jason Hall 110. You can do so on your mobile devices that I'm sure you're already on anyway. So go ahead and pop that up, and then you'll see where it comes into play. And so, Jason Hall, my name is Jason Hall. What I'm here to talk to you about, celebrate, and look forward to is how impactful product is replacing, I think, is going to be the new sort of working software in our Agile mantra. But before I do that, I want to take some time to actually sort of appreciate where we've been, right? It's been 20 years. It feels really short, but 20 years is a long time, or maybe I'm just getting old. But 20 years is quite a while. And we've been some places in 20 years. I mean, right around in like the early 2000s, a couple things were changing. The US had relaxed their cryptography export laws. It seems sort of obscure and arcane. But what that really enabled software companies to do is ship one version of their software product as opposed to the multiple that they had to do internationally. Right around the early 2000s, we had XP, Wikipedia, Bluetooth headsets, of course, the iPod. The Wii came out then, which I didn't realize was 20 years old until I went out and tried to buy a game pretty recently, too long ago. And then I think the sales attendant looked at me like it was a little weird. Gmail was released, and then of course real networks, right? All these things were happening around the early 2000s. And this mantra, the like putting the focus on working software over comprehensive documentation. We say it so many times as coaches, as agilists. It almost seems like, well, of course, right? It seems intuitive. Like, why would I value anything other than the thing? Why would I value a standhold or a placement for the thing? Why not just the thing? But if you remember the 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 landscape and the infrastructure and the of IT of software was very it was a different place, right? It was very difficult to get something released into production. And right, and production normally wasn't on the, I mean, wasn't until later in the 2000s for the most part. I mean, we're still talking about printing software builds on CDs and shipping them, right? So that was a very, very difficult process. And so getting through that, I mean, it's been absolutely tremendous, right? And I admire the founders of the manifesto for sort of thinking that and putting that at the forefront, to have us see our beacon be that thing that we're not there yet, right? We weren't at the valuing actual software. We were still in the documentation aspect. And it was great. I remember a couple years ago, I was working for USCIS, Citizenship and Immigration Services. And at the time, Mark Schwartz, the CIO at the time, had arrived a few years prior, and he had done something really radical in the government space. He had moved from a government organization that was shipping software products a couple of times a year per product to imbuing a DevOps mentality and mindset, to moving towards continuous deployment and getting to delivering out the door at a government organization every 2 weeks, right? And deployment every 2 weeks now, it sort of seems like, well, of course, if you're at a commercial organization or it's some startup or Silicon Valley startup, this is status quo. I mean, you're not even delivering every 2 weeks. You're delivering more frequently than that. But back then, that was huge, right? So, it makes sense that, hey, this working software, does the customer like it? Is it out in production? Is it working? That's the thing that we want to value. Having said that, who here can think of times when working software just quite wasn't enough? Right now that we sort of reached that milestone, and I'm going to pose a really difficult question for you at 7:30 in the evening. But I want you to, now is the time you sort of go to your phones. If you go to pollweve.com, Jason Hall/JasonHall110, you should see this poll. You don't have to leave your name. You can just skip that part. But can you think of products and software, a product or a piece of software that, while it functioned properly, left you wanting? Right. You just see banking. Oh, it's already coming in. Banking, Microsoft Surface, Tableau Online. What else? Anything else? I know this is sort of a difficult question, right? What functionally worked, but sort of winded in a dud? All right, and I don't know if you can see with the background I've got there, but I'll sort of read some of these things off. Banking is huge. Yeah, I'd like to sort of go into that a little bit more. Conferencing, messaging, Quest, tablet. All right. Now they're coming out. Government. All right. So all that to say, while it's great that, we valued and we put the emphasis on actual working software, that's not enough, right? I've took the liberty to come up with a few items from my own. I had to do a little digging to sort of refresh my memory. Google Wave, does anybody remember that product? Google Wave was a email online document collaborative doohickey thing that didn't really go anywhere. Software worked great. Apple's Ping, which was supposed to be their social network for music. That was a product service that they launched. A litany of Facebook products. There was Facebook deals, daily deals. There was Facebook email. They came out with an email service where you could use them as your primary email provider. And then a separate Notify app that you could download separately to find out about all the things that you could find out in Facebook. So that went nowhere, right? And I don't say this to, right? I don't say this to bash valuing working software. Sort of quite the contrary. It's actually only because we've gotten really good and really fast at deploying working software that now we can take that one step further. And we can look more deeply and intrinsically at the value that that software is supposed to be providing. And how do we get there? Well, I mean, there's been an explosion of data everywhere. If you think about the Internet of Things, everything having its own IP address, geolocation services. I can tell where geospatially, physically something is, a person, a product, a thing. I can tell where it exists on the network and the infrastructure. A/B testing tools, right? This is just sort of like this is probably one of the most phenomenal things when I think about the ability to release multiple variations of the finest and smallest piece of feature attempt, right? Organizations, product teams will feature test font styles, right? This font or that font, get more clicks, right? So here, I mean, if we stop the pause, right? What once took months to a year to get out, right? One big let. We now have the technology to empower product teams within one organization, right? To release multiple times a day, a week. I mean, if anything, we went a little too far forward. And some organizations that said, hey, even though you can release every day, I don't think customers really appreciate that. But the point is, we now have the power of experimentation. App sharing policy so that we can see how the data is used, not just inside of the app, but outside. So all these things make it possible for the first time to look at the impact of a product outside of that product itself, right? And so what do I mean? What do I mean when I say that? When I think about product impact, so let me define that for a second, right? I'm actually not talking about clicks, like do people like it? Is it being used? But I'm talking about an anchoring to probably more of a basal human need that we can universally say things that we value. For example, financial stability, health and mental wellness. Here's a couple examples I've put. One from a company or a product that I use all the time. One from a product who I will soon use. I'm getting ready to subscribe, but I know the chief product owner and we had a conversation there. And the other is a stand-in for a company that I coach, and I'll get into that in a second. So first, Strava, for those of you who don't know, is an app that lets you track and see the progress of your activities. You're running, cycling for athletes, right? Strava means to strive in Swedish, I think. And it basically lets you, if I go on a run around my neighborhood or a bike ride on a certain route, I can see how fast I went on that particular route compared to all the thousands of other times that I've done it. I can see how fast I've gone compared to everyone else in the world who's ridden on that road and on that street. And so that had the effect of gamifying exercise, right? I mean, this was sort of like mind blowing. And if I take that a step further, right, their main goal is to make you a better athlete or a person into an athlete if they want to become an athlete. The data to do that is actually there, right? If we think about how do we want to define that, right? Well, one might define someone who wants to be an athlete in terms of are they entering in competitions that athletes enter in, right? So if I've always wanted to run a marathon or do a bike race, well, that data is out there. I can go to USA Cycling and you can download, you can see all the races, the officially licensed races that all amateurs have done, where they've placed and how they finished. And so what that means is, right, so going back to the Strava, if I'm a product manager or a product team or a team within that company, I can track the impact of a product decision outside of that product, right? It's no longer just, oh, did somebody use this cool little nudge feature? But it's, hey, if we nudge or offer this coaching thing, will people actually compete in more events? Will they be AK more or better athletes? Let's see. Let's find out. Whoop is another is sort of a health monitoring device. It tracks your sleep, your recovery, and your fitness, right, through a lot of proprietary data. It's almost looks like an Apple Watch, sort of. It goes in, but it's really in the sort of the data analysis that the product and services is wrapped around. And so it can tell you, hey, are you fatigued for this walk that you went on or this run that you went on? Did you do poorly just because you're not feeling it, or did you do poorly because you didn't get enough sleep? But also something else really, 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 really cool. They started realizing that some of the data, one of these data elements was an early warning indicator to COVID, right? So I think it was like resting heart rate. It's some data element that remains relatively stable and unchanged. And if it fluctuates and these other data elements remain stable, it's a sign that you're getting sick. And it's usually something that's detected that is 100% of the time has been unbeknownst to you, right? So athletes have sort of gone on, or their Whoop users have gone on and said, like, hey, by the way, this thing told me I might be catching a virus, and I went out and got a COVID test and found out I actually do have COVID. In the present day, that's probably about as impactful as you can get, right? So what we're doing here, and what we're on the verge of doing, is shifting the emphasis of what we value, right? It's not that we don't value working software, right? Because without working software, without the quick speed and release and delivery and correlation between impact and result, we can't get this thing on the left. But it's the impactfulness, the tangible, measurable results that we actually value a little bit more. And so I'm going to talk about a real example from a credit monitoring product team that I was on, that I helped, when myself and another coach, when we started with the organization, their product strategy looked a lot like Minnie's. Said, hey, we want to build kick-ass products, and we want to increase our user adoption, and we want to increase engagement, and we want to have a really cool product, and we think we're going to do it by delivering these really cool features that's going to get us to this big software expo. And what we said, we looked at it, said, well, where do you anchor to? What's the thing that you're driving there? Because you're not going to build a great pop product by talking about building a great product. You're going to build a great product by demonstrably solving a fundamental need or problem. And so when we looked at what can we anchor to, the set of customer outcomes that made sense were financial wellness. We said, okay, well, what's a customer outcome that an actual customer would say they care about? Right? That's financial wellness. So that was the first step. And then we said, well, what does that mean? How do you measure financial wellness? Well, from the customer's perspective, we looked at through user interviews and through user research, we find that people would describe financial wellness as being able to save for an emergency, being able to get rid of debt. Most Americans are in considerable debt. And being able to plan for the future. There's a few more, but I shorten it for brevity. But these are probably three of the more top ones. Right? So we said, okay, well, we've got a customer outcome. We've talked about define what that looks like, right? We still have to, the company still has to make money. So we need to think about what are the business outcomes of value that we looked at. And so they looked at what the revenue drivers were for those, and they've annotated those. And then the next step was to talk about, okay, well, we got the outcome. How do we measure these things, right? What are the KPIs for those outcomes? And so we assembled a diverse group of folks, not just in product, from data scientists to designers to tech. And we said, well, okay, how do you measure getting rid of debt? So that's a simple one, right? And we came up with what those KPIs were, all while trying to stay in the sort of customer's lane, right? So reduction in debt is typically looked at, well, what's your debt to income ratio? Okay, so we'll use that, right? So once we establish the measures, right? Once we're anchored, make sure we're anchored in the right thing, but then we establish the measures for that. Then we get the cool thing of figuring out, well, what's the benchmark? Okay, debt to income ratio is the measure. What's the benchmark for that? For that particular one, it's that one's sort of universal, so it's known. It's about 36%, right? No more than 36% of your income goes towards paying debt is looked at as when you cross that threshold or go under that. People generally tend to feel like they are out of debt. Now, once we sort of have that anchored in place, we could do something absolutely radical. We can focus around the outcomes that actually matter, right? Not around arbitrary or superficial product drivers, but around, hey, how are we going to, we can connect our product vision, right? The product leader, the leader of the organization can connect to the product vision and say, yeah, I want to be a beacon in the financial sphere for our users. And here's how I'm going to do that, right? I'm going to do that by improving the financial wellness of our users. And within this year, we're going to focus on that through, getting rid of debt or being able to save for an emergency, right? Next year, you might tackle something else. Right? And then once that was established, they could see what the benchmarks are, right? They could see, okay, well, now if we looked at all our users, what's the single biggest thing that's leading them to not feel financially well, right? So you can make measurable decisions on what to go after, right? So this created the framework and the structure for how we would organize, right? And then we actually literally, the tech teams, everybody in the organization, product, BAs, data analysts, we were organized around product lanes and components. We reorganized around customer and business outcomes, right? So that's at a high level. Now, what does that look like in the weeds, right? Because you still got to actually build stuff to make it happen, right? So I sketched up a mock of a rough approximation of what we went through, an example of sort of what we went through. One of the product leaders had a hypothesis that, hey, one thing we could try is goal coaching, right? Credit score coaching, right? The idea that, hey, as a user, you come in, you'd say, oh, my credit score is this. Boy, would I like it to be here. And then we would give you nudges in the right place and time to sort of coach you along the way. And then after some period of time, eventually, hopefully, voila, you reach your goal of a higher credit score. And with that higher credit score, you can, right, circle back to that first outcome driver, right? You can plan for the future, right? So there's the thread that sort of connects everything. And, why this is really important, because without that first piece of work earlier, without the actual hard work of anchoring in those customer outcomes, you know what success looked like? Clicks and conversions. Hey, people used our feature, right? These are things that we actually valued and we thought was value years ago, right? Because that's all we had. We couldn't do the correlation, right? We said, hey, if people are using it, it's great, right? But can you think of a situation where something gets used a lot, but doesn't actually serve a deeper outcome, right? I can set goals all day, but what if my credit score never moves, right? What outcome am I serving then? All right. So you've heard me go on. Hopefully you're still here. You're thinking, you're present. I'm going to ask you to do something in a little bit, right? So I talked about, for the most part, I talked about not for the most part, for all the part. I talked about outcomes from the customer perspective, right? Which are definitely great. But what I want to ask you next is when you think about measures of value, and this goes across both customer and business, what comes to mind for you? And let me ask that more pointedly within your organizations, not in theory, but what do you hear most of the time when you think about measures of value? Revenue. Customer satisfaction. Okay. Let me come back to that one. Backlog lowering. Yeah. Points, story, affordable housing. Yeah. Kudos. Okay, I think I get that. Risk. All right, we got revenue, NPS, customer satisfaction as some of the higher ones coming up. All right, savings, efficiency. All right, I'm going to touch on some of these, right? But first, I do want to talk about, let's actually talk about, since revenue is front and center, let's actually talk about business metrics, right? What does that look like? But before I get into that, I will say one thing, I think because of this shift, I think it behooves every Agilist, specifically coaches, right? If you're in there sort of helping your organization, to become smart in the business area that you're coaching, right? At least smart enough to know what those business drivers are. So here's an example for SaaS companies, software as a service companies. These are common business metrics that are used to make sure that you've got you end up in the black, that you're a profitable company, right? Average revenue per account, that's pretty obvious. How much money do you make per user? Customer churn rate is, how fast are you losing customers? Revenue churn rate is how fast are you losing revenue. That typically tails customer churn. And this is a really, really important one. I'd say if you learn nothing else, customer lifetime value is super important. Right? That's right under profit. And customer lifetime value is a combination of, hey, what's the average you make off of a customer, right? Could be per year, per month, whatever that is, multiplied by the average time that they stay with you, or your average retention rates. So for example, if you make your subscription service $100 a year per customer, and the average time that most customers stay with you is 2 years, then your customer lifetime value is $200. Fun fact, while I was looking this up, Facebook, and this isn't a poll, but you can just guess in your head. If you can guess what Facebook's average revenue per account is, I found this with one source, so I'll probably have to verify this, but supposedly it's $70 a user a day. $70 per user a day.
What?
Yeah, that's absolutely ridiculous. And by the way, we should all know this now. You're both the user and the product, right? So yeah, that's I've got words for what that is after this. But anyway, it's still an important metric to know, right? These few, right? Customer acquisition, how much does it cost to actually acquire new customers, right? You subtract that in from your average revenue per account. And then how much does it cost you to keep each customer, right? How much does it cost you to keep them once they're on board, right? So if you can sort of learn and figure out how this works into your organization that you work with, right? Assuming that that's your model. And if this isn't your model, right? If you're a B2B organization, or you are, this is DC, if you are a nonprofit or government organization, find the equivalent metrics, right? Because these need to show up in the work somehow. All right. So, right, it's important that we know the business metrics. Important that we know how do we actually measure value from the business end, right? Because there's two sides to that equation. There's the business side and there's the customer side. But, right, what happens when we leave the customer out? Right? What happens when we're just measuring business metrics? And I came across a story or news report from prior employees of online dating apps, dating services, sharing some of their really, really unfortunate secrets, but that maybe probably won't surprise you. All right. So if this first one here, the individual relented that, hey, the algorithms that they have, the things that they're building, they're really designed to get you to pay and stay on the system longer, not really to find you a match. This number 5 was striking, and I had to sort of quote that here. Turns out most men log onto these dating systems later at night, 10 o'clock, maybe about the time we finish this conference. And most women log off earlier, right? So that creates a problem, right? If most of the men are on at night and the women are gone, well, that's not really good. And so if I'm primed to increase customer engagement, keep customers paying, and I have no customer outcome anchored into my strategy, that can lead to some really malfeasant things. In this particular case, I don't know what dating service this is, could be a few of them, but they create ghost profiles of women. These are actually dudes in Serbia and Ukraine that are purporting to be women employed by the dating service to, fake connection and connectivity, right? Also, we can keep those app numbers up and those members. If that's not reason enough to make sure that this is anchored into your business strategy, I don't know what else is. All right. So business outcomes, measures, that's great, right? I talked earlier about, the customer outcomes, but let's get back to what actually are customer outcomes. And I know I saw some of those responses there, so you'll see some of this. And this is the part I want to try to use the thumb up down thing. So maybe I'll try, I don't know if I can try the participants view. No, I can't see it. Oh, wait, there it is. Participants. Come on. Okay. So what I'm going to ask you all to do is when I go through here, raise your hand if you think that's a customer outcome. Leave it if you think it's a business outcome or it's nobody's outcome. All right, leave it down. All right, let me. Oh no, I can't. Give me 1 second. Thanks. And this so I can see the participant view.
Yeah, for those
there we go.
For those listening, there is a raise hand button in the Whova or the Zoom window of Whova that you can use to raise your hand when Jason prompts us. All right, I've got my view up. I can see this is going to go lightning really fast, so pay attention. All right, remember, raise your hand if you think it's a customer outcome. Leave it lowered if it's not. Completed story points. Okay. All right, pretty good. This is gonna get harder. Working features. Ooh. Oh, all right. So we've got about 9 hand raises, and I realize there is a problem of people who are going to raise their hand either way. So I don't know how to account for that. But all right, so we had 9 for that. Not that many for completed stories. App usage, i.e. engagement, right? Our customers engage. Oh, this is shooting up. We've got 8, 9, 10. These are customer outcomes. All right, feature conversion. And for those of you who don't know, feature conversion is all that means is, are people using the feature, right? So say if 10 people see the feature, how many of them use it? So if 3 people out of 10 use it, we'd say the feature has a 30% conversion.
right? So feature conversion. Raise your hand, customer outcome. Got a few. Successful logons. Customer outcome or not? Successful logons. Oh, we're dropping down to 4. All right. Reducing calls to a call center. Customer outcome or not? Well, that's kind of high. Let me see if I can remember these. 9, that might be the highest one. 10, yeah, I think that's definitely the highest one. All right. Clicking on your really awesome ad. Customer outcome? Oh, yeah. Well, okay, none for that. Okay. All right, now my take. So completed story points, right? It's not a customer outcome. Could be, but not really. Working feature. So a lot of you said, yes, you think that is a customer outcome. I'm going to go on a limb. I'm going to say that it actually is not a customer outcome, right? So just to clarify, it may lead to a customer outcome, but it is not necessarily a customer outcome, right? If we think back to the dating app story, about, like say you got a team that builds a notify when this user is online. The feature works. They click on it. They go to talk to said user. Say they're talking to Lonnie, and they're like, "Hey, this is great." Right? The feature works, but that's really not Lonnie. That's a 20-year-old Serbian or Russian or wherever these folks are coming from. Right? So, right, just because the feature works and the user is using it doesn't mean that it's serving a particular outcome. Same with app usage or feature conversion. I can think of a few times. So this is actually this is a real story. Typically, right, normally you want people to use your product, right? So app usage is a good thing. But when when you're sort of myopically focused on that, it can lead you to make some pretty sort of crazy leaps of logic. In this one particular case with this organization that I was working for, they, within the credit score domain, they were debating, hey, we can show a customer's updated credit score, with a quick notice. But the problem that presented is if they show them an updated credit score, then it does not provide any incentive for the user to actually go on to the app, right? Because why would I need to go onto the app when you just told me, hey, yeah, my credit score went up? That's awesome. That's good to know, right? So if you are just anchored toward, are people using my app, and not towards, I want them to use it, but I want these higher order things to be true, right? It can lead you to making these types of decisions, right? All right. High NPS. So customer satisfaction. This one trips a lot of people up. I don't even know if I said this one in there. All right, but I'm gonna let you off the hook. So this one came up in some of the earlier polls. I will say this, even though it has the word customer in there, it is not a customer outcome. There's a really, really, really good trick that I'll share to determine whether, hey, is this a business outcome or customer outcome? So NPS, getting a high NPS or boosting your NPS scores is actually a business outcome. It's a customer-focused business outcome, but it's a business outcome. So from the perspective of the customer, right, if you're ever curious about, is this a customer outcome or not? From the perspective of the customer, say, yay, and then insert the thing that you're tracking, right? So, yay, I just gave this company a high NPS score, right? Doesn't really make sense, right? But maybe, hey, oh, that's awesome. I didn't have to like call anybody to complain about this issue. Right, that might make more sense. So reducing calls to the call center, for example, probably could be both a customer and a business outcome. All right, so this stuff is hard. I do want to leave you with some more tangible advice of how do we anchor to the things that matter, right? And I would say, right, do these 3 things, right? Anchor to one of the 7 dimensions of wellness, right? And they're over here on the right, right? Financial, social, occupational, spiritual, physical, environmental, intellectual. And if you start there, right, we know like human beings want, want a balance in these sort of 7 areas, right? This is a primordial basal need, right? So if you start there, it'll be hard to go wrong. So anchor into one of those 7 dimensions of wellness, and then establish, still within the customer perspective, establish KPIs from that perspective. So this is tricky, and this is what I mean by this. So oftentimes we can say, hey, we want customers to be financially well. And then when you go one level down on someone's KPI or OKR chart, the next thing is, and we know they're well when they're using this feature, when these like customer conversion scores are up, right? But again, right, if you use this simple tool, if I stay in a customer perspective, how would a customer describe that they feel like they're financially well, or they're socially fulfilled, or they feel strong or resolute in their occupation, right? What words would they use to describe that? Use those as your KPIs. And because that second bullet is so important, go ahead and reread it. Those are my three tips. And if we look at, so, I know I pull from a SaaS perspective a lot. But if you look at where the industry is, according to how well these companies are reviewed. And for those of you that don't know, so NPS is Net Promoter Score, right? Basically what that is it takes the number of people who would highly recommend you and subtracts the number of people who would highly not recommend you. So the detractors. And whatever that difference is, that becomes your NPS score. And so the industry average for, this is in 2020 for SaaS companies, right, is below a lot of other industries. So the moral of the story is, if you're in that space, there's a lot of room up. There's a lot of room for improvement. All right, and we're wrapping up here, and I am going to get to questions. So how do you make your organization more impactful? Well, besides the okay, we've got these customer outcomes, business outcomes, we can find those. But if you're, not getting traction, one of the first things you should look at is, well, what's the incentive structure in that organization? How are managers and product leaders, how are they rewarded? Are they rewarded for shipping big things, fast, shipping a lot of things? Or are they really rewarded for delivering outcomes? I had on another team I was coaching, this is really, it's kind of sad. One of the features that they shipped out the previous year, it was a paperless billing feature that allowed, basically within some workflow, allowed customers to say, hey, please don't send me my bill via mail. Send it to me and send it to me digitally. It was a couple stories long. It didn't take that long of an effort, but it saved the company like $20 million and like millions of dollars. I mean, this thing was huge. And you know what I was hearing around that? This is from leaders in the organization. I was hearing, yeah, but it wasn't a lot of work. As in, like, they were genuinely disappointed that it wasn't a big feature that netted that much value. And I was floored, right? Because what that clearly meant is that the motives and the measures of success for that organization were not in the right place, right? So this is really, really strong, right? Focus on an incentive structure. In the same organization, a positive side, different side of the organization, I walked in, I remember this is maybe the second PI, no, it was the first PI, second sprint or something, that I was there at this organization. And the VP at the time, I noticed he quelled any celebration of feature release, and which I thought was weird, right? Like, this team had worked weeks and weeks on getting an MVP of this feature into production, or at least turning it on. It went successfully, didn't break. Nope, we're not going to celebrate that. So he had a habit of sort of quelling celebration of releasing software. And I was floored, and I asked him, like, I kind of thought, I was like, I think I know, but let me just hear it from him. And I said, well, why Ron, let's change the name of the person. Why do you not let your teams sort of celebrate when they're producing, when they actually ship something big after they walked over? And he said, because we don't know if it's valuable or not. It hasn't had the time to collect in market feedback. Right. And before we talk about, well, yeah, you can release a prototype, you can test all you want, right? With paper prototypes or with a few people, right? But until you get in market feedback, right, there's a lot difference between what customers indicate that they desire and what their actual customer behavior is, right? That's another talk for another day. That's behavioral economics. But the point is, right, just because these features go out doesn't mean that they're actually going to have the value that they were intended to. And by not celebrating, he did celebrate, but it was after the results of that data came in, typically in a week or two, that he would say, like, hey, that thing that we deployed, yeah, well, it reduced calls by X%. Yeah. And then we would celebrate. So he did that because more times than not, your features and experiments, will fail, right? It's incredibly hard to do something really big and grand. And he wanted to make it way easier to kill a feature and deprecate a feature when it did fail. And in order to do that, we had to stop putting the incentive on shipping those products, getting those things out the door. It was sort of like, that's really good, but let's sort of wait and see, right? Because it made it a lot easier to sort of fail, right? And make big pivots and shifts. So I thought that was really cool. I want to share that all with you. Going right down the list, customer outcomes are great. And we talked about why you need them. But no business is going to listen to you if you just talk about customer outcomes. So you've got to find a way to interlink both customer and business outcomes together. So when I coach and look at teams, I talk about, even within epics and features, bringing in what aspect, for that last feature we talked about, the goal scoring one. Okay, so it's success if this many people click on it, and then that's further success if they follow the goal scoring nudges, and then you've got ultimate success if the credit score moves. But then also the complementary business metric is, you want to reduce churn rate. Like, that's great, right? You need both of those to sort of make your case. All right. And then when we talk about getting measures, when we talk about, well, how do we establish the measures for success? Get product design and data science, get a multidisciplinary perspective at the table when you're talking about those measures, right? You just get product there and say, yeah, this is ultimately successful. This is what we want. But if you got a data analyst there, might say, like, well, yeah, we don't even have access to that data, right? So you want to get a sort of cross-functional, multidisciplinary view into at a seat at the table from earlier on. And this last one is really big. And I saved that one for last. Revisit every step of your product and execution delivery process, right? One of the things that I think we get well is, or one of the things I should say, that the way that we think about work, even the Agile, like initiative, epic, feature, story, the way we've sort of thought about this sort of hierarchy of how we think about work. Well, that works well when you have a proven sort of business model, and maybe you're doing some large initiative to refactor or make it more stable. But when you're in a green space field, or when you're trying to push a new product idea, aka you've got a new hypothesis, this actually does not work very well. Right? If you think about my earlier example that I mentioned, that thing was an epic, right? The goal coaching bit, right? That was an epic. Hey, we want to coach users to a higher credit score goal. And there are so many hypotheses in there that can and probably would fail and tweak, right? So we need to rethink about how we even think about work. I think instead of that sort of stack flow, I generally think, very, very shortly out, we should focus and sell upwards in the organization an outcome-driven roadmap that says, no, like, don't worry, like, I'm not going to talk about initiatives or epics. I'm going to talk about, in the third quarter, I'm going to tackle this part of customer indebtedness, and this is what I hope to move. Right? I'm looking to I'm looking to drive that outcome. I'm looking to reduce customer debt within this market, by X% or whatever that is. This is the outcome I'm focused on, right? Gives you a lot more leeway to sort of move and flux in there. Okay. So with that said, that's impactful product. This is the way. And ending on a high note, what we just talked about, none of that is possible without working software, right? None of that is possible without the speed and that pipeline and being able to do segment analysis on what customers are seeing, right? But because it is there, we can shift the needle to impactful product. All right, thank you, Jason Hall, and I guess we'll take questions now, right? So let me stop share.
Yeah, thank you so much, Jason. That was incredibly insightful and really made me think of that, all the work we do, is it really making a difference if it's not bettering someone's life, if it's not really making a difference in someone's life and creating that impact. And that just really made me think about, we need to take some time to think about the impacts that what we do and all the things that we're making and building and delivering. Because if you don't, then, like you said, you're just creating something that may not even be making an impact, right?
Yeah, maybe use that.
So that, that very insightful. A lot of things that I never even thought about. We had a lot of comments in the chat here.
Yeah. Sorry, I didn't. Where do we want to start?
We have some questions. Let me see. So for product roadmaps, do you still what are the advantages, disadvantages to a feature-based roadmap versus outcome-based roadmap?
To be honest, I see very limited advantages in a feature-based roadmap for most, like at the root of it, when you really look at, and if you were to take your roadmap and approach it from pick a feature and say, what is this thing supposed to do? Well, this is supposed to, this feature is supposed to make this process easier. And take that to its natural end till you get to a customer or business outcome. When you connect it to that, you'll realize that that's really, it's a hypothesis. It's sort of an unproven hypothesis, right? Unless, again, your feature roadmap mostly consists of things that are refactoring in nature of already proven business models. Then I say, yeah, if you want to, we're moving this part of our business model to the cloud, or we want to transform this service into some microservices to make it easier for these teams to use. I think that's great. But anything that is like customer, like we have this new feature that a customer is going to see, it highly suspect. So I think instead, what I coach people to do is, look, you're not going to get away with saying upwards to management, like, don't worry about what we're doing. There's nothing to see here. We're just making cool shit. Like I know that's not going to work. But what you can do instead is, look, we are focused on these 2 or 3 outcomes. You drive the conversation there, right? And the outcomes are we're talking about empirical. I'm talking down a little bit from the financial wellness, but down 2 or 3 KPIs and say, like, these are the things we're focusing on. And oh, by the way, like, here's some things we have penciled in to try. And we did this at the previous organization. We pushed back a couple times when senior leaders were asking for, I thought you were going to do that goal coaching thing. And then you sort of explain to them, look, you could do all the pre-market feedback. You could have all the design labs. You bring users in. You have, like, that will tell you desirability, yes, but will not tell you user behavior. Right? There are so many times that desirability and user behavior do not match up and do not line up.
Right.
There was a shoe customization product. There's a whole service. I forget the name of the company. They had all sorts of customer feedback and design sessions with customers that said, I would absolutely love to be able to customize my shoe and do X, Y, and Z. Nobody used it because it turned out that people that really didn't want to take the time to make a designer shoe. Like they just wanted an option to be built for them, right?
I would love to do that as long as I had all the time in the world.
Exactly. Anytime you, and so like that's sort of the, anytime I get an executive that says, well, you really need to like push on delivering it. I was like, look, at the end of the day, do you want this big feature or do you want to see the churn rate reduced by 10%? Right. Or do you want to see do you want to be able to say, hey, we demonstrably move 15% of Generation Xers from a lower credit score tier to a higher credit score tier? Doesn't that sound a lot better? And so I think when it's a lot of work, but once you do it, it's absolutely the right track to be on.
Thank you. We got another one here. How do you prioritize which customer benefit is most valuable to deliver first?
So hey, Jason, sorry, I'm jumping in here, just making sure that we are 15 minutes over time. We have two options in here going forward. Number one, you can choose to answer this question right here. Or you can go to Whova and answer that question. It's totally up to you. I don't want to stop anybody's learning, but just making sure that we are a little cognizant about time. We are 15 minutes up and it's about 8:30. Totally up to you how you want to handle it.
I'd love to hear the answer to this question though.
I'll answer
for
that
it.
one, and then anyone we can put into the QA.
Sounds
So
cool.
this is
Maybe I can kick the police out.
yeah. This is a bit sort of science and magic, right? How do you choose what customer outcome to go to? Like what is your business strategy? Where are they going towards? So thinking about like, hey, do we solve customer debt first of that aspect? Do we solve customer savings, right? Well, a lot of it is, well, where's the rest of your organization going? If the rest of your organization, for example, is saying like, hey, we want to expand into this new market. Okay, what are the problems of that new market? What problems are more pertinent to the customers in that new market? So all those types of things can help guide you and answer that question. There really is no super easy answer to go like, well, which of these problems do we have to solve? That's a great place to be in. It means you've actually found the problem, right? It means you've said like, oh, we actually know what these factors are. We know what the benchmarks are. We know how our customers score. Wow. Now it's just like, where do we want to go? And the truth of the matter is you might go many places. You might say like, hey, this group over here, you guys are in charge of like helping customers save more. And maybe this group over here, we want you to tackle their debt issue with respect to like, so there's many different ways to do that. Ultimately, it's going to be like, how is it anchored into your organizational strategy? One, is it even viable? Right? Yes, you still need to make money. Can you make money off of it? Do we have the technology to do it? All those things sort of factor in to that decision. All right. That was the last one. I'm sorry I went over. Happy to answer any questions in Hova. How do you say it again?
Hoover.
Hova.
Yeah.
Right.
Or as Toby says, ooh-ah.
Ooh, reminds me of like Al Pacino saying the woman.
Right.
Yes.
Yes.
Anyway, thank you
so
all.
much.
I appreciate you all staying to the end. It's Friday night. It's awesome. Have a drink. If you're not already having, or if you don't drink, don't drink. If you do, great. Thanks. See you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jason.
Thank you. And Jason, no one would have stayed longer if they didn't find value in it. So thank you. It was obviously extremely valuable.
Yes.
Before we leave, we have amazing sessions tomorrow. We have our keynote, Alistair, at 10 o'clock. So please join us tomorrow. There's a lot of raffle prizes, lunch or networking, and panel discussions. You don't want to miss it. So we request all to come back tomorrow. And thanks, everyone. Have a great Friday night. Cheers.
Thank you,
Jason.
Thanks, Jason.
See you all.
Bye-bye. Thank you. Bye-bye.